The rancher saved a hanged Apache girl. 20 years later, she returned with an army. After losing his wife to sickness back east, Thomas chose a life where words were few and days were ruled by work. His ranch sat alone near a stretch of rugged land most settlers avoided. Soldiers passed through from time to time, and rumors of tribal conflict drifted on the wind, but Thomas stayed clear of it all. He believed trouble followed those who went looking for it. Most days followed the same simple rhythm. He rose before dawn, checked his cattle, repaired fences, and returned home as the sun dipped low. His cabin was small but sturdy, built with his own hands. A single oil lamp lit the evenings, and the sound of coyotes filled the night. Loneliness lived with him, but it was quiet, and Thomas preferred it that way. One late afternoon, as the sky burned orange and red, Thomas rode back toward his ranch after checking a distant water source. His horse slowed suddenly, ears twitching, uneasy. Thomas noticed it then, the stillness. Birds were silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. He followed a narrow path along a cluster of trees he rarely passed. That was when he saw something that made his chest tighten. At first he thought it was a broken branch hanging low. Then the shape became clear. A young Apache girl was tied to a tree, motionless, her feet barely touching the ground. Her head leaned to one side, hair covering her face. The rope around her wrists and neck told a story Thomas did not want to understand. This was not an accident. It was a punishment left behind, meant as a message. Thomas froze. Every warning he had ever heard rushed through his mind. Do not get involved. Do not interfere. Soldiers would blame him. Tribes would not trust him. Helping her could cost him everything. For a long moment he did nothing but listen to his own breathing. Then he noticed something small but powerful. The girl's chest moved. Barely, but enough. That was the moment mercy chose him. Thomas dismounted and moved quickly, his hands shaking as he cut the rope with his knife. He caught her before she fell and lowered her gently to the ground. Her body was light, too light, like she had not eaten properly in a long time. Her skin was cold, her breathing weak. He pressed his ear to her chest and felt a faint heartbeat. He did not think anymore. Thinking would only bring fear. He wrapped her in his coat, lifted her onto his horse, and rode hard for home. When he reached the ranch, darkness had already fallen. He carried her into the barn instead of the house, afraid someone might see. He laid her on clean hay and brought water, wetting her lips carefully. She did not wake, but her breathing steadied. Thomas worked through the night, warming her hands, cleaning the marks left by rope, and whispering words she likely could not hear. He had no idea if she would live. Morning light revealed her more clearly. She was young, maybe 14 or 15, with sharp cheekbones and a face marked by both fear and strength. Thomas noticed scars on her arms, signs of a hard life even before this moment. He felt anger rise in him, not toward a single person, but toward a world where a child could be left like that. By midday, she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, dark and alert. The moment she saw him, fear flashed across her face. She tried to sit up but lacked the strength. Thomas stepped back, raised his hands, and spoke gently. "You're safe," he said. "I won't hurt you." Her eyes followed every movement he made. Trust did not come easily, and Thomas understood that. He left food nearby and gave her space. When he returned later, the food was gone. Over the next days, she recovered slowly. Thomas stayed careful, always aware that soldiers could ride in at any time. He told no one. He worked during the day and watched over her at night. She never spoke, but she watched him closely, learning his routines, his habits, his intentions. Thomas learned small things about her without words. She preferred water over coffee. She flinched at sudden sounds. She had nightmares and woke silently, sitting upright, eyes wide. When Thomas noticed, he would step outside and let her calm herself without feeling watched. One evening, as he repaired a saddle near the barn, she finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, rough from disuse. "Why?" she asked. Thomas looked at her, surprised. "Why what?" That was all. He learned her name was Ayana. She did not speak of her people or what led to that tree. Thomas did not ask. Some wounds were not meant to be opened. As days passed, her strength returned. She helped with small tasks, feeding chickens, sweeping the barn floor. She moved quietly but with purpose. Thomas noticed she had a sharp mind. She learned quickly, watched everything, and remembered details others might miss. But danger hovered close. One afternoon, Thomas spotted dust rising in the distance. Soldiers. His stomach tightened. He knew what he had to do. That night he packed food, water, and a small knife. He explained with care that she could not stay. Soldiers would not understand mercy. They would only see guilt. Yana listened, her face calm but eyes heavy. "You saved me," she said simply. Thomas nodded. "That's all I meant to do." Anyone could have done the same. He returned to his ranch alone, carrying the weight of what he had done and what it might cost him. Days passed. Soldiers came and went. No one questioned him. Life returned to its routine, but something inside Thomas had changed. The land still spoke honestly, but now it echoed with a memory. He did not know if Ayanna survived. He did not know if his choice would bring trouble or peace. All he knew was that, for one moment in a cruel time, he had chosen mercy over fear. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a young girl carried that memory with her, planting it deep in her heart, where it would grow in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Years passed quietly for Thomas Hale, but the quiet never felt the same again. Life returned to its usual rhythm on the ranch, yet something inside him had shifted. The days still began before sunrise, with the soft sound of boots on dry ground and cattle stirring in the distance. He still fixed fences, counted animals, and watched the sky for signs of weather. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, however, Thomas carried a memory that refused to fade. Sometimes, while riding along the edge of his land, he found himself looking toward the distant hills where Ayanna had disappeared. He wondered if she had reached safety. He wondered if she had food, shelter, and people who cared for her. He never spoke her name out loud. It felt private, like a promise made without words. The borderlands grew more tense with each passing year. New settlers arrived, bringing families, wagons, and fear. Soldiers built more outposts and moved through the region more often. Stories traveled fast, stories of broken agreements, misunderstandings, and pain on all sides. Thomas listened but stayed apart. He did not take sides. He focused on surviving and keeping his land whole. Yet the memory of the girl in the barn reminded him that staying apart did not always mean staying untouched. As Thomas aged, his hair turned gray at the edges and his hands grew rougher. Loneliness pressed heavier at night. There were moments when he wished he had spoken more to Ayanna, learned more about her world. But he reminded himself that asking for more would have been selfish. Helping her live was enough. Far away, beyond the ranch and beyond the places Thomas knew, Ayanna's life unfolded in a very different way. When she returned to her people, she found little of what she remembered. The land was familiar, but the faces were fewer. Families had scattered, moving constantly to avoid danger. Trust was fragile. Food was never certain. Ayanna was welcomed, but her return raised quiet questions. Survival had made everyone cautious. She spoke little at first. Her body healed faster than her heart. Nights were the hardest. Sleep brought memories she could not escape. Still, she worked. She learned. She listened. The elders noticed her sharp attention and steady patience. She did not rush to speak or act. When she did speak, her words were thoughtful and clear. Over time, people began to seek her out, not because she demanded respect, but because she earned it. Ayanna learned skills that were passed down through generations. She learned how to read the land, how to understand signs others missed, and how to think several steps ahead. She learned that leadership was not about loud voices, but about steady choices. She also learned the cost of anger when it was allowed to guide decisions. The memory of Thomas stayed with her, not as a story she told, but as a quiet reminder. When others spoke of settlers as if they were all the same, she remained silent. She knew better. She knew one man who had chosen compassion when it would have been easier to turn away. Years went by. Ayanna grew from a quiet girl into a strong young woman. Loss shaped her, but it did not harden her completely. She understood pain, but she also understood restraint. She saw how fear led people to choices they later regretted. As conflicts continued around them, some groups acted without planning, driven by desperation. Iana watched and learned what worked and what did not. She saw that strength without direction led only to more loss. She believed there had to be another way to protect their future. Gradually, people began to follow her guidance. She helped organize movement, shared resources fairly, and encouraged patience when emotions ran high. She spoke of unity, not revenge. She reminded them that survival required wisdom as much as courage. Her reputation grew quietly. She did not seek it, but it followed her. Even those who did not fully agree with her listened, because she had proven herself through action, not words. Meanwhile, Thomas noticed changes closer to home as well. Travelers spoke of groups moving together with purpose, not chaos. They spoke of leadership that valued discipline and planning. These stories made Thomas uneasy, not because of fear, but because of curiosity. He wondered if Ayana could be part of that story, though he never allowed himself to believe it fully. There were nights when Thomas sat outside his cabin, watching the stars, thinking about the long chain of choices that shaped a life. He knew his decision years ago had been simple, made in a moment without thought of reward. Yet he sensed that simple choices often carried the longest shadows. As the land around him changed, Thomas adjusted. He hired a few workers, repaired old structures, and prepared for harder times. He did not know why, but something told him to be ready. Not for trouble, but for change. Yana, too, sensed that change was coming. She saw patterns others ignored. Movements of soldiers, shifts in trade routes, and growing pressure on the land told her that waiting would only make things worse. She began a plan carefully, bringing together groups that had once acted separately. Her goal was not destruction. It was protection. She believed that showing strength in an organized way could prevent greater loss. She wanted her people to be seen not as scattered and weak, but as united and thoughtful. When she spoke, people listened. When she acted, they followed. Not because she demanded loyalty, but because she inspired trust. Still, in quiet moments, she thought of the rancher. She wondered if he still lived on that land. She wondered if kindness had cost him something. She carried a sense of debt that never faded. It was not a debt that could be repaid with words or gifts. It was deeper than that. She promised herself that if fate ever crossed their paths again, she would make sure his mercy was honored. 20 years had a way of shaping people into versions they never expected to become. Thomas became a man marked by quiet endurance. Iana became a leader shaped by memory and loss. Neither knew how close their paths would soon come again. The land watched them both, patient and unchanged, waiting for the moment when past and present would finally meet. The morning air felt heavier than usual on Thomas Hale's ranch. The sun rose slowly, casting long shadows across the land, but Thomas sensed something different even before he saw it. His bones ached more than normal, and his horse shifted restlessly as if aware of something approaching. Years of living on the frontier had taught Thomas to trust these quiet signs. He stepped out of his cabin and scanned the horizon. At first, there was nothing but open land and distant hills. Then he noticed a thin line of dust rising far away. It was not the kind made by wandering animals or a single traveler. This dust moved evenly, steadily, as if guided by intention. Thomas felt a calm settle over him instead of fear. He did not know why. He had prepared for trouble many times in his life, but this felt different. He leaned against the fence, eyes fixed on the approaching line, waiting. As the figures grew closer, he could see they were many, moving together with discipline. They rode in quiet order, not rushing, not spreading out. This was not chaos. This was control. Thomas's workers noticed too. They gathered near the barn, whispering nervously. Thomas raised a hand, signaling them to stay calm. "No sudden moves," he said. "Let's just watch." As she came closer, Thomas felt something stir deep inside him, a memory he had not touched in years. She stopped a few steps away and looked at him carefully, as if confirming something long remembered. "Thomas Hale," she said. Hearing his name spoken in that voice sent a quiet shock through him. It was calm, controlled, yet familiar in a way he could not immediately explain. He studied her face, searching through time. Then he saw it, the same steady gaze, now older, sharper, carrying weight. "Ayanna," he said softly. She nodded once. "You remember." Thomas felt the years fold inward, bringing that long-ago night in the barn back into the present. "You've grown," Thomas said. "So have you," Ayanna replied. There was no accusation in her voice, only truth. She gestured gently toward the riders behind her. "They will not cross your land, not today, not ever." Ayanna spoke calmly, explaining that she had come not for harm but for closure. She told him that the world had changed and that many were afraid. She wanted him to hear her words directly, not through fear-filled stories. "You saved my life," she said, "not because it was easy, not because it was safe, because it was right. I did what anyone should. And I wanted others to see that mercy is remembered. Anyone who travels with us will know this place is protected." Of how choices shaped paths. She told him about learning patience, about understanding that true strength came from restraint. He told her about the long years of quiet and how often he wondered what became of her. Their conversations were simple but meaningful. Two lives shaped by the same moment, finally meeting again. Before leaving, Ayanna stood at the edge of the ranch and looked back. "What you gave me," she said, "I carry forward." After Ayanna and her people rode away, the land around Thomas Hale's ranch slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The dust settled. The wind moved gently through the grass. The cattle grazed as they always had, yet nothing felt the same anymore. It was as if the land itself remembered what had happened and chose to hold it quietly. Thomas stood alone near the fence long after they were gone. He did not feel proud, and he did not feel afraid. What he felt was something deeper, a calm understanding that his life, simple as it seemed, had mattered in ways he never imagined. In the days that followed, people began to talk. Travelers passing through spoke in low voices about organized groups moving across the region with purpose and restraint. They spoke about boundaries being respected, about places left untouched. When Thomas's ranch was mentioned, there was always a pause followed by quiet respect. No one questioned why. Some things were better accepted than explained. Thomas noticed changes among his workers too. They were less anxious, less quick to panic at distant sounds. Knowing they were protected brought a kind of peace none of them had felt before. Thomas never used the word protected himself. He simply said, "We treat the land right and it treats us right." One moment of mercy, given without thought of reward, had traveled across 20 years and returned stronger than ever. He realized then that kindness was never truly small. It only waited. Far away, Ayanna continued her journey. She led with a steady hand, always reminding her people why unity mattered. She spoke openly about discipline, patience, and memory. She never told the full story of the rancher, but she made sure the lesson was clear. "Respect those who choose compassion," she would say, "even when fear tells you otherwise." People learned that survival did not always require cruelty. Seasons changed. Thomas's hair grew whiter, his steps slowed. Still, he worked each day, careful but determined. He repaired fences, trained younger hands, and passed on what he knew about the land. He never spoke of Ayanna unless asked directly, and even then he kept his words simple. "She's a good leader," he would say. "And a good person." As the years continued, Thomas felt his strength slowly fade. He was not afraid of this. He had lived fully, even if quietly. He wrote a short letter one evening, sealing it carefully and placing it in a small wooden box. Inside, he explained the boundaries of his land and his wish that it always remain a place of peace. He trusted that whoever found it would understand. Not long after, a familiar group of riders appeared once more at the edge of the ranch. This time they did not come in formation. They came slowly, respectfully. Ayanna was among them. She dismounted and walked toward the cabin. Thomas was sitting on his porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky. "You came back," he said, smiling faintly. I promised myself I would, she replied. They sat together as the sun lowered, speaking little. Words felt unnecessary. They had both lived long enough to know that presence sometimes mattered more than speech. I wanted to thank you again, Jana said softly. Not just for saving my life, but for reminding me who I wanted to be. You did the hard part yourself. When the burial was complete, she stepped forward and placed her hand over her heart, just as she had done years ago before disappearing into the light. From that day on, Thomas Hale's ranch remained untouched. Even as the world continued to change, that land stayed quiet, protected by memory rather than force. Travelers rested there. Workers found safety. Stories passed from mouth to mouth, growing softer but never disappearing. They said it was because a rancher once chose mercy when fear would have been easier, and because a girl, saved by that mercy, carried it forward until it changed far more than either of them ever expected. The land remembered, and so did history, even if it never wrote the story down.
They are coming for you. Leave now while you still can.